Hello everyone, welcome to this video. This is our fourth video in this series. In this series, we are learning how we can test our application, our .NET application. So generally testing in .NET. And if you have not watched the previous video, there's a link in the description. Go and watch from the first video up to this video. So in today's video, we are going to learn how we can test something like enumerable, list, object, date. So these things are something that you are going to do when you are working on your real world application. Sometimes you need to test certain object, you need to test some kind of enumerable to check if what your API responding is what you were expecting or something like that. And getting the solid foundation on how you test object or list or enumerable is a key foundation for your testing journey. So in this video, we are going to look at that on how we can test this in .NET. If you are new to the channel, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so that anytime we drop a new video, you may receive a notification. So thank you for joining the Cliff Tech community. Let's get started. To get started, I have my Visual Studio open here. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create a new project. So to do that, I'm going to hit create a new project. And then Visual Studio will give me some templates, and what I'm going to do is first I'm going to create a console application. After that, I will create the testing application. So let's do that. So first of all, I want to go and then create a certain console application. That is where we'll create our class and method and everything. If you want, you can also create a blank solution and then add all those projects to it, and each one of them works. But for me, I want to create a console application first, then we go ahead and create the XUnit project. So in our previous video, we learned how we can test a simple method using XUnit, and that is what we are doing here. In this one, we are continuing with XUnit, but to test list, enumerable, date, and properties and all that in .NET. So that is what we are doing here. So let's go ahead and create a new project, and this is going to sit in here, and the name that I want to give is part 4 of this series that we are doing. So you see that the previous one was just part 3. So we are going to continue, and this is going to be part 4. So that is the name I'm going to give to this. So I'm going to give it the name of this part 4. So what I'm going to change is that I'm going to change this to be part 4. This is it. So this happens to be part 4, and that is it. So let's go and then bootstrap our console application. We are using .NET 9, so you can go and then say that you want to create your project, and then Visual Studio will then try and create your project for you. And then you can see we have only console application right here, and it's not doing anything. So just a console application, and it's writing hello world. So what we want to do is to create in a class that is going to hold all the method that we want to test. So in this case, we want to test for list, object, and then properties. So we create the method, and then we then create our test project for the testing. So that is how we are going to do it right now. So before we go ahead and create, let's also create our test project. So we can just hit on the solution and say that we want to add a new project, and then we pick, in this case, you are going to select XUnit. We already have our console application in place, so we then select XUnit because that is what we're going to use for our test. And then we're going to say that this is going to be the test project, right? Test project, let's say maybe test project core or any name that you want to give. And then we go ahead and say that create. So this is also having this test right here, and that is what we are going to use to test our application. So now the next thing we need to do is trying to make sure that this project reference this. So we're going to say that add a project reference. And the one thing we are going to add is that the goal is to make sure that the console application is referencing the testing project, so that we can then call all those methods in the testing project and test them. So that is the second thing we do. So now we have everything here. Our first goal here is to create our classes, or our method that we want to test. The actual method that we want to test is what we need to create first, so that we understand our logic and then we know how to test them. So I'm going to give it a class, or let's create another class here. You can do this and say that you want to create a new class, or you can use the shortcut. And the name I'm going to use is a testing object and correction, right? So testing object date list and correction, or something like, or enumerable or something. But this sounds good, so let's use this. So this is going to be the class that we want to test. Here is where we are going to put all the method that we would like to write. So first of all, what we need to do is I'm going to make sure that I have some properties coming in. So the first thing that we need to do, let's zoom this one out so that you see it clearly. So the first thing that we need to do is that we need to create certain kind of a properties. So to do that, I'm going to say that public. So Copilot is going to give us an issue here. Public string right here, name. So this is one property we have. Let's say, because we are also going to test date. So let's do that. But this one, I don't want what the Copilot is giving me. I'm going to say that create created date, because we are going to create in a method that we are going to use to test this. So we have this. Now we have our date time, have our property. The next thing I would like to bring in here, we need to create is a list. So we are also going to see how we can test a list. So we probably will say that this is going to be a list of string, right? So let's say that this is a list of string right here. And what I would like to do is that I'm going to say that string list. So let's give that name. Sounds good. List. So this is it. But we are going to do something here. And you see that we have our getters here. And we want this to be private set. Our Copilot is giving us this. We don't want it. So we want this to be private. We want this to be private set. We want this to be private set. So we have our get or setters. Copilot. So let me try to disable the code. So now let's go ahead and create our properties. And this is what we want to create: a string of list. So that is one thing we want to. And then we want to create corrections right here. So let's check this one. We have a correction of a number correction or something like that. So we will say that because it's going to be numbers, we want this to be a string, hint. So this is supposed to be, and say that number, let's give it a name of number correction. So this is number correction right here. Then we also get it like this. So we have our number correction also working. And then we will also like to test in object. So we're going to have our dictionary coming in, and we want to test some properties, but this one, the suggestion is wrong, because we want to make sure that this is an object, and what we want to, the name we want to give to this is properties. So I'm going to say properties. And let's do the same for this ones. Okay, so now we have our properties set. We need to first of all make sure that we're going to do two things. First, we're going to have a constructor. So let's try this and see that constructor, and this is the method that we are going to write the test for. So we're going to say constructor. So let's write this one, constructor. So this is constructor, and what I'm going to do is that I'm going to say public. We pick in this because the constructor we are going to generate is going to generate it for this one, and then that we do this like this. And what we are doing is that we are providing some default instance. So the constructor, when we say constructor in C#, whenever we are adding a constructor, we are saying that we want to make something available globally. So if we have a class and then we add a constructor, we add the properties as a constructor, it means that those properties should be available globally in the class, right? So that is what we want to do, and then we're going to create an instance of these things and we make it available in the whole thing. So I have some instances where we need to create. The first of all is that we're going to hit in the name. So the focus of the video is basically the test. So let's fill this in with some objects, the properties object. We have these things and it's very easy. So we have a constructor, we have generated a constructor for this class, and then we are setting in some kind of properties we want to use. The properties as a constructor, it means that now it's globally available in a class. Okay, and now we are also going to create another one. We say that constructor with properties. So this is, you see that we just created an instance of some of the things, the properties, but we can create another constructor with properties inside, right? Property as perimeters. So that is what we are going to do. So let's copy this, and this is just a class I want to create. So let's make this a public class, and these are the things that we are going to write a test for. So we have this, and what I want to put into this is a name. First of all, name like this, and I want to have date term. I'm going to use this in the test. So, and then we bring in the created date. So this constructor is accepting this properties that we have in here, and what we do is that when we get those properties, we say that name is called to name. So it means that with this one we can pass in a certain things for this. So the created date is given as an warning because that is not what we provided in here. Okay, let's make this small. So that is the class. So basically the class is not the main focus of this video, but I wanted to show you how we are doing it with the properties. So I have some method that will help us to add and then create. So if you want to, I have all this method. Let me bring it here. Let's look at it. This is what we are going to write the test, and this is a simple C# class, and it has method inside. So method to populate a correction. So this we can add something, right? We can add a string properties. We can add two numbers to the correction, and then we can also add the properties, and I will show you how we are using the key and date term, and then we have all this date. Since the date is created, the goal is for us to get access to date term that we can test, write the test for it, and have our correction and then have our properties. So this is it. We create a simple C# class. Now the interesting part is that we are moving into the test, and then we have to make sure that we are going to write tests for all these properties. And in your journey with testing with C# or .NET, you might come across all of this where you need to test in date term or something. Make sure that if I create this term, the term work, or something like that happens to your project. So that is what we are doing, right? So the first thing that we're going to do is we go ahead and create our testing class. We already have this. We can use the testing one. It sounds good. We can do that. I think we can use this name if we want to. And I'm going to show you a strategy that you use for testing. Before you start writing tests, you need to come up with a test cases. So what we call test cases is mean that the scenarios that you can test for. So we have this class here that it's just a C# class and it has method in it. So we are going to test the method that is inside. And we already know that whenever you are testing, you first of all bring the class name or method name first. That is your name. So in the test cases is where you come up with a test name. So because you already have scenarios on what you want to test. So you first plan for your test cases before you get started writing test. So I'm going to come up with test cases. Then we start writing tests. So we don't write test. So we first need to come up with test cases. So when we look at this method, what can we do? What are the things that we can test for? What are the scenarios? And the first thing is that default constructor should initialize with a default value, right? So the default constructor that we have here, we have to make sure that the default value that we have set is what we have in. And that is one test cases we have. And then we can go ahead and have more test cases as we move forward. But so when we get the test cases, that's going to be the test name. So what happens is that the test always also trying to return void, right? As we move forward, we are going to come up with more complicated or a scenario where we need to change this scenario or change this format. So first of all, we can then come up with this name. That this is what we want to test. Let's try to remove this. And then say that this is one test case that we have. The test case is that default constructor should initialize with the default value. And that is the first thing we are doing in here. We just pass in some kind of a default value into the constructor of this class. And that is one thing we have to make sure that we are trying to return. So that is our first test. So we can say that first test case. So this is our first test case. Let's move to another one. So we first of all, the second thing that we did here was also after default one, we move ahead and do perimeters, right? Constructor with perimeters. It means that we can pass in something to this, and then what we want to pass in is just name, dates, and all that. That is what we want to do. So we have to make sure that the default, the perimeter constructor should provide values, right? So you have to make sure that we provide some values to this, and then it will return something for us. That is another second scenario we want to test for. So we're going to write another test. So whilst you're doing this, you're coming up with names, and that is very important. So we have another name that we have come up with. So we are using our XUnit, so we make sure that our fat is already hitting up, and we're going to bring in that test case. So that is another test case. Perimeter, we should make sure that we will be able to pass in the value into it, and then we get some return. And when you check, the next one we do is add to string, right? That is what we want. So we have to make sure that add to string should add to the string list, because the string list is what we want to add. And this is how we do test. You analyze your method, you analyze your class, then you come up with cases, a scenario where you want to test it, and then you come up with a test. So now we have another test, which means that we want to add this to the class. So I'm going to say that this is also going to be another name. So we do this and say that let's bring the fat in And what I'm going to do is that public void, because we want to add to the list. So we say that add string list should add to the list, and that is the method we have in here. So whenever we add something, we want to add to the list, this list, which is a list that we are testing in C#. That is a list. So that is good. And we can also go ahead and say that add to number correction, because the next step is this is a number correction right here. So if you add something to it, it should be added. So we can go ahead and also run that test cases. So it's also, we're going to say that public void, that is a test case name. So we are coming up with all these test cases, and the test cases we already know that it's kind of a scenario where how we want our application to perform. It perform like this, what's happening? If you perform like this, what's happening? So those are the things you basically analyze, and then you come up with test cases. And the test cases, we are giving it names here. Right now we have one, we have about 4. So this method, we can go ahead and give it more test cases, and as we move forward. So let's go ahead and also come up with another one. So this one is that add to property should add to the property. And when we check our class right here, we see that this is a property that we add to, and before we do is created date since and add total count and all that. So all this method, we need to come up with a test cases for it. So if this is your webapi.net, if, as we discussed in the previous video, when a user logged in, what's happened? If the user enter password, if they enter wrong password, if the refresh token is expired, all these things are things you can then come up with a scenario. So you come up with cases and then you test for it. One thing that test helps is that whenever your code is growing, you might even make some changes, and it's going to affect the whole code. And one way of you to know that something is breaking is your test, because your test is already passing and all of a sudden it's not passing. It means that you have done something somewhere. So testing is a must in your programming journey or your programming life. So let's move forward to another one. Now we probably want to also come up with another test case that add property should update the existing property. So if you want to update the properties here, if we add, we can update it. So that is why we have these keys and everything here. So let's go and come up with that test case. We already have added properties to the corrections you add. Now we are saying that we want to update it, and we are going to write the test. Don't worry, but I want us to come up with the scenario on how we develop test cases. So you don't just start writing tests. You have to make sure that you understand your application, and then you know what you're going to test for. That is the key. So the next thing that I want us to do is that it's created. This method, we need to come up with it. This, so it's created today, should return true for today's date. That is it. That is one test case. So let's also bring in up the name. I don't want to type the names because it's long. It's going to take time. But the concept is here is that whenever you are doing testing, you are writing test, you first design the test before you go ahead and write it. I'm not saying go and do it like what I'm doing, but having a fair idea of what you are going to test for. So this is what we have here. And then we have another test. So because that is the method issue, whenever we add to it, it should add to it. And one thing that I want to do is that this one too also has a test. They since create a creation, right? We also need to make sure that whenever we do that, so this since creation should also return correct number of days. That is it. That is also another test case that we can test for. So let's go and then have the facts. And we already in our previous video we learned what the facts means, and why XUnit is using it. So if you have not watched that video, go back and watch it. The link is in the description. The whole playlist link is in the description, so you can go and get the link and watch the video from day 1 up to day 4. So that is it. And the total count is also here. So the total count, now we are here, get item. So get item is what we also get total count should return sum of correction of the total count. So that is it, and we should test that. So we're going to bring that one to that name in here. So now we have a lot of test cases where we can test for this class that we have a lot of method cases that we can have. So it's created should generate correctly, so we can also test that. Name should also get property correctly, so we can also do that. And then we can also say that get clear all correction. So we see that we have this, that clear all corrections for us. Clear all corrections should be clear. So that is the thing that we do. We can also take the negative side. What if this didn't happen? So let's go and also do this. So that is, we have a lot of tests. And then name should set correctly. So whenever we set a name to a property, and I want to do this because I want to do this and trying to explain a concept we didn't explain in our part 3 video. Okay. So I want us to come with a test. For now, let's do it like this. Don't worry about whether it's going to throw an error. Let's have this test. And the last test should be that created should also return this. So let's start writing the test. We have facts here and we have this. Oh God. So we should have this and then we have this. So now this is our test cases, and let's comment on this because as we go, we will start writing our first test. So the first things we wanted to test for is that when you're another team member or you're another code developer, pick the code base, when they look at the name, they know what you are testing for. That is it. That is one key. So if I say default constructor should initialize with the they already have an idea on what the test is doing. And that is one beauty side of testing. So somebody can pick your test and understand your code base, because your test is trying to test the logic. So if I don't understand your logic, I can look at your test and know that, okay, if I want to log in, this is what I'm do. If I enter wrong password, these are the things that is going to happen. And that is beautiful. So let's go and write our first test. Now we know how to come up with test cases. To come up with test cases, we pick our application, we analyze it, and then with this, the scenario, if it goes like this, what's happening? If it goes like this, what's happening? Those are the scenarios. And now we already know that we have what we call a range, where we prepare everything that we want for our test. And then we have what we call a set. And okay, we have at, and then we have what we call a set. And what we are saying is that our range is where we prepare everything we want to test, and then the at is where we want to execute. We want to perform the action. So in most applications, that is where you'll be calling the service that you want to test for, and that is the beauty of .NET. But in this case, we want to basically do the arrange, because the arrange is also being to act as something. So I can say the arrange and act, something like that, because of the scenario we are testing for. But in the previous video, we learned how we can do the asset and act. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to bring in the class, and then we're going to say that let's give it a name of test object. So the test object is going to be new test. So this is the class that we have. So it's going to be our class of the class of this, because we want to create an instance of this. So that is it. This is what we bring in. And in your previous video, we created a constructor where we're using it for everything. But this one, we are making it very easy. We have our class in, because we are going to test the constructor of this class. So the first thing that we want to do is that in the asset, that is where we can think of asset as validations, where we check if everything that we want is working like how we expect it. So we can say that, okay, it should be like this. Okay, we check if it works. So the test object right now, what I want to do is that I want to, okay, and one thing we should also take note is that we can go ahead and install Fluent Assertion. So that is one thing that we are using, and we forgot to install that. So the assertion also, we have a lot of assertions, and XUnit basically comes with its own assertions. But in this project, what we are doing is that we are using Fluent Assertions, and which is easier, as since we are starting, we are learning how testing works. So we can search for that one in Nugget. So we just pass in and see that Fluent Assertion, and we should get it coming in. So this is not what we want. We want the Fluent Assertion, and the Visual Studio is trying to load it, and it's taking long to load. And then we have it here. So we can go and then install that, because that is what we're going to use. So now that we have that, our Fluent Assertion in place, the next thing is we need to say that test object. The test object we have here should be, so what thing is that the name that we have in there is default. So we can say should, we can say that should the name, so the test object, let's don't forget the name. So the name in this constructor should be should, and then we say that B, right, should be default, because so default, well, that is what we have in there. So when we go to this class, you see that the name is default. So we are expecting we test for the constructor. We have to make sure that the name that we have in the constructor is default. And this is a basic concept, though. When we get to testing web APIs, we will test real world scenarios for you to understand. So this is the assertion that we can come up with, and then we can also do it like that. We have another one, which is the created date, and then we see that the date, because Fluent Assertion also has a date, should. So this is the things. It should not be null, right? Or we can say that should be close to, because we were using date term. So should, always when you do they should, and they say that be close to. So what do we want this to be close to? We cannot test exactly the dates now, but we want it to be close to what we have at that time. So that is one thing. So we can then say that date term, we want it to be close to now dot date, and we're gonna bring in the C# term span, and then say that from, let's make this big, from, okay, when we have the time span here, we're going to say that from seconds, and then what we are doing here is that we want to pass in 1 second and then close this, and then we do this. So we want to this term that we have or created that, which is the term that we instantiate this constructor, we want it to be close to this, right? So you can see we are getting it nearby, right? Closed. So that is good. So that is most of the things that we can do, how the accession works. And then I'm going to say that I want to test this. So we want to also test the string list, and we don't want it to be null. So we should, so whenever we bring issue, we do this, and we say that this not null. We don't want it to be null. And we say that add not to null, okay, and we say add and be empty. So the point there is that these two things are different. When in .NET, we already know that no, not no, it doesn't mean that it's no, but the empty is different. So this is very simple. Should not be null and be empty. That is it. It can be null, but it shouldn't be null, but it can be empty. That is it. So it's there, but we don't have anything in it. Okay, we can also go ahead and say test object. We want to test the properties, and then we're going to say that this should also be the same thing. That is it. So the accession helps you to validate what you have in the class. So that is it. So now when we fire this guy up, right, we can run the test. Let's see what is happening. I have my test runner here. Let's open it and see if this test will pass. And then it's passing. So you can see that the test is passing right here. And the test runner in Visual Studio is very nice to the point that it will mark it if it passes. So you see that the test passed. Okay. So our first test is passing. And those are the assertions and how we do that. And that's what we are going to do for the rest of the test. And basically, this is helping us to test the property, the time, and everything. Okay, so now we can move to our next test cases, or our next test case. So the point is that this test case is kind of similar to this. And this one, we wanted to test the values that we have in the constructor. And this one, the second one, is that we want to kind of provide a value ourselves and test it. And so we can go, and this time around we bring in the arrange, and the next one that we want to bring in is the act. And then we're gonna have our set in here too. So let's put the asset wall. So we have the asset in here. And what we want to do is that when we go to this class where we provided the perimeters, constructor with perimeters, you see we take in name and date stamp. So we can go back right here, and first of all, the arrange, we already knew that is where we prepare everything that we want to test. So we say that expected name. Let's go and give it the expected name, and I'm gonna give it maybe test object. Test object. Let's spell it well. Test object. So this is it. And our date time, we can see that the expected date time, but here we want to do something. I want to say that new date time, but what I want to pass in is that I want to pass in maybe it's 2023, and I want to say that 1 and what we're going to do is 0 0 0, and I'm going to say that date kind, and then we set that one to UTC right here. Good. So these are the things that I'm going to pass in into the constructor with perimeter. And now the asset is where we execute everything. So the asset is where we basically execute the action. So you're going to say that var test object. I'm going to say that new. We create an instance of this. So we can bring this one here. And this is it. But now we are going to pass in the expected name, and then we pass in the expected date into this. So now we have added our parameters into this. So we can go to our asset, and that is the fun part. So we can see that test. Our test objects here, the name that we have passed in, name, we can say that it should be the name, the expected name that we have passed in there. So, and B, so be the expected name. So because when you check in here, what we're testing initially with the default constructor is that the name should be default, because that is what we have in the constructor. And here with the perimeters, we are adding something, and we are saying that the name should be the what we just added. We can do the same for the others. So we say that here we're going to say that the created date should be the expected created date, and that is what only thing. These are the only two things that we added. The rest can be like the one we have, which is they add to this once cannot be null, but it can be empty. So we pass in this, we can copy this and pass in the same thing, and now we have a test case. So when we fire this guy up, and then we go back to our test cases, it's running. Let's see if it passes. So now this is also passing. So it means that when we pass in a perimeter to this constructor, this class, it works for us. And that is the beauty of it. Now let's go ahead and also test this one. This one is where we add a string to a list. So we are testing a list here, and what we can do is that we can go ahead and say arrange. We have our range, and then we are going to have our arts, and then we are going to have our session coming in. So asset, and the first thing is that we are going to add a lot of things. So here, first of all, we're going to create the instance of this. So, and why we are repeating ourselves, don't worry about that. When we move forward, we will do more things where we can add this instance to a constructor and use it. So we say test object is equal to new. This is the class. We're bringing the class right now. And this is part of the arrange. And now when we go back to here and then this is the one we want to test, add to list. So we add item to this, and then you can see this is a list, so we can add multiple things to it. So what we're going to do is that I'm going to create in, let's go back to our test, and this is our test. And in here, in our range, we can create some kind of items that we want to add. So I can see that, and the item that we need to add to this is a string, right? So we can see that string right here, item to add, right? Item to add, and then we are not going to add empty stuff here. So we're going to see that this is gonna be a test string. So that is it. So we can basically copy this one, okay, and then we paste them multiple times, and then we change them. So we can see that this is going to be 2, and this is going to be 3, and then this is going to be 4. And make sure we do this around them. So we are going to add all of them, and in the add is where we basically execute. So now that we have everything as arranged in the arrange, we can call the actual class that we want to execute this for, the actual method. So we say test object here, and then we say add to, this is what we want. And what happened is that we first of all do item to add, which is this, and we can copy all of them. So we can copy and then paste, because we are going to add multiple to it. And then this is going to be item to add, which is the 2, and this is it. So we are adding a lot of different string in here, and we're going to say that item to add 3, and then we're going to hit this guy up. And then the last one, we're going to say that item to add 4. This is it. So now we have added all these things to the list, and the asset is very easy, because in this time around we say that the test object, because if we add this to the list, what we can think of is contain. So we say that this string list should contain this one. So we can do the same for the rest. So we can copy, paste, and we change them. So this is the assertion we want to do. If we add, and then we say that the list should then contain what we just added. That is what we want to do. So the first one that we wanted to do in here, let's arrange this properly. The thing is that this should be 2. So item to add 2, which is this. We have the item to add 3, and then item to add 4, which is this. And these are the assertions or the asset that we can do. But after adding everything, we want to also count the list and see what we have, which we are expecting it to be 4. So test object, and then we say that when we get the list, we want to do count. and the count here should be 4. So now if we hit this guy up and we go to our test runner right here, we should see this thing passing. So it's running. This guy is not running. We should run it again. So when we come here, we see that now it's passing. So whenever we add something to the property list, it's add, and then we count and 4. Let's change this to 5 and see. Make sure that our test is doing what we want. So let's run this guy again. We're expecting it to fail, and then you can see it's failing, and then the can't be 5 but found 4. So that is it. It's not just like we are adding what we want, random stuff. If you make a mistake, it will fail, and it will tell you the reason why it's failing. So that is it. So we can add something to a list, and that is one thing that we have tested in here, and it's very interesting. So it's the same as this. The next test cases is add numbers to a numbers correction. This is a list. We adding more different thing to the list, and then this is also adding to a correction and numbers, just that this is a number. So we're gonna do the same approach that we did in here, call the instance, and then we do all this thing, but this time around, instead of a string, we pass in numbers. So we do this for the first one, because this is going to be the range that we have. So we say that arrange. Okay, we go back, and then we say that we have our arts, because here is where we add. Then we're gonna have our asset also here. Good. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create just numbers, right? So this one was just a string. Here, this is going to be numbers. So we're gonna have numbers like this, just 42 and everything, and we just add them like this one, where we do the assets, we add everything to the correction to the list. This is going to be correction, so we add everything to the correction right now. So it's very simple, the same scenario, so we don't need to write that. It's the same. So let's make sure that this is called to test object, something like that. It passed. So we can go ahead and also add the last one, 4. So these are the things we are adding number to a correction. We want to test and see if we add it works. So the same scenario we did, it should expect it should contain this, it should contain this, and then we do the count. The same format. So most of your sessions, if you master how the sessions works, you are going to use it across your application. So that is it. And so now we just have to go ahead and bring this, because it's the same thing. But this time around, I want to make it this 4. 3 will fail. So it contain number, and then contain number 4, and then it should be, the expected should be 4, because 1, 2, 3, 4. So that is the beauty of it. So let's fire this guy up and see if it is passing. The first one that failed, we should rerun it. Let's rerun this. Okay, it passed. So the number one is that the correction does not contain 45. So we don't have 45 here, but it seems like we are adding 45. Because add to 4, this should be 45, right? So add this should be 45, add number, and we see that it should contain. Okay, here we are saying that not. Okay, so we are making a mistake. So one thing that we can also do is that we can come up with another scenario. Like, it's not always you're expecting it. You can also go the other side. We can say that number 5. Okay, number to add a score to, let's say, 50. Let's go to 50 right here. We are getting an error that, let's get this and make this 5. This time around, this is going to be 5. And then let's add it here. And the assertion we are going to, we see all of this one is contain. We can decide not to add this, the 5. And then in our session, we are going to see that if we are not adding it, what's happening? Right. So it should, in here, we can say that not contain the number 5, right? So the 5 is not part because we have not added it. So in our session, we are saying that the results, what we are expecting, shouldn't be part of it. And we can go back and run our test guy again. Now it should pass. Now you can see that our test is passing. So that is one way. You can also always test the negative side of it. It's not always we want to check it work. It's all it work. So that is what we are going to do for the rest of the test. If you want to pick up a challenge, I'm giving you a challenge that pick the rest of the test and write it yourself. In the same scenario, I'm going to make this code available on GitHub. We have done most of them, and then now you have the idea of how you test all of these things. So the other test scenario that we came up with is here. Pick it and test it, right? And it's going to be very interesting that you can do better. So I just want to give you this test cases. So if you're watching this video, take this as a challenge and try to follow the same procedure we have been doing to write the rest of the test. It's going to be part of the code. So go and write it. We don't want to keep this test name again. So do it, and then if you face any challenge, drop your comments in the description section or in the comment section. I'll respond to that. And don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel and leave your comment, like this video, and share with others. So I'm going to see you in the next video where we are going to talk about mocking, how to mock something, what is mocking, and how does it work in .NET. So don't forget with the challenge that the test name that we have in here, you are going to write it and complete it yourself. You can do a pull request if you want us to add or whatever you want. This code is available on GitHub, so pick it and write the test. I'll see you in the next video. Don't forget to subscribe. So thank you for being part of CliffTech family. Bye.